pod bay doors.
Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of the Cinematic Traveler Podcast. I am your intrepid movie exploring host, Chris, and on this episode, I am going to be bringing you one of the most anticipated films of 2025. And judging by the amount of people in my movie theater, that is undisputed. That would be Riff Raff, a movie you've probably never heard of. But it is directed by Ditto Montiel and has an amazing cast, including Jennifer Coolidge, Ed Harris, and one of my personal favorites, Bill Murray, which is what drew me to this film, because I do love a good Bill Murray movie, although he has done a few bad ones. Which one is this, good or bad? Well, you're going to find out. For the 1 billion of you that are listening, or the 2 or 3, I don't know. There's a wide range in my listener numbers. But I am always excited to be here talking to you about movies. But before we do, I do have to ask a favor of you. Whatever you're listening to the show on, somewhere on that device, there is a follow button. So if you could please click that follow button, it does help me and the show, as well as helping you, because you won't miss any of my future episodes. And you can go back and listen to my previous amazing reviews and listen to my sexy, sexy voice. Also, if you could share the show with your friends, family, annoying coworkers, share it on your social media. Speaking of which, if you want to follow me on my social media, I am on Instagram at Cinematic Traveler Pod. I have a X or Twitter. That one is at CMT Pod. I'm on Blue Sky. That one is at Cinematic Traveler something, something, something. And I have an email address, thecinematictravelerpod@gmail.com. So you have plenty of ways to follow the show as well as get in touch with me. There, I got through all that podcaster mumbo jumbo quick, fast, and in a hurry so we could dive into this episode. But before I do, as I like to do on every episode, let me ask you, how are you doing, my beloved listener? Are you surviving 2025? It has been a wild ride, and we're just now hitting March. Oh my God, I have no idea where the next several years are going to go. Oh boy. Oh boy. But I'm here, and I'm going to give you a diversion for the next, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes. At least keep your mind off of the fact that we might be headed towards World War III. Oh God, I don't even know what side my country is going to be on. That's the sad part. But anyway, I am excited to be here talking to you. I'm trying to think if there's something else I need to tell you. I do have some tweaks to the show we're going to do. I am, believe it or not, recording this visually as well as a podcast. So I might put this one out there because for some reason you just can't do a podcast anymore. You have to have a visual podcast so people can see me talking into this microphone. How exciting is that? If you are watching, if I do put this out there and you're watching, I do apologize. I know a lot of these movie reviews, they got like all kind of, I don't know, toys and movie related DVDs and posters. I got like my Jaws poster behind me and a sheet or a blanket here holding up, keeping all the sound out, as it were. Anyway, this is my studio. So we're trying different things. I have a segment after the review, a little act of kindness that I would like to do probably once a week. And I got a few other tweaks here and there. So I'm excited about this episode, of course. I'm always excited to be here talking to y'all. Except I do have to bring up something a little sad, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about it, and that would be the passing of Gene Hackman under mysterious circumstances. But I'm not going to get into that. I just want to honor the man. He was one of the best actors in the history of Hollywood. God, if you grew up 70s, 80s, and in the 90s, 2000, I mean, geez, he was one of the names you always look forward to watching one of his movies, from French Connection. Oh God, what else? Superman. One of my favorites, Mississippi Burning, No Way Out. God, the guy, he could play it all. Good guys, bad guys, anything. He was just really great in just about every movie he's ever been in. I know as a kid, I grew up on, I saw Superman the movie. He'll always be Lex Luthor. And he has one of those movie quotes that I use from time to time. That's not really a famous movie quote, and I don't know if you have these, but it's something I do whenever I misspell a word, which happens quite a lot. Just to let you know, I am in the South, so English is our second language. So I misspell a lot of words, but every time I do, I go Otisburg. And then when I try to argue with myself, like, well, it looks right, I always do the follow-up. Otisburg. I don't know why. It's so stupid. Do you have any lines like that? Let me know if you have any weird movie lines that you just throw out from time to time. Yeah, we're gonna miss Gene. I know he's been retired for a while, but it was sad to hear of his passing. Two-time Oscar winner. So yeah, if you haven't watched any of his movies in a while, or maybe you're unfamiliar with his work, definitely check out. I mean, God, like I said, French Connection, Mississippi Burning, Unforgiven. Oh, I could sit here for probably the next half hour, and you don't want me to do that just listing Gene Hackman movies. What kind of podcast would that be? Anyway, so Godspeed to you, Gene Hackman. So now that I have gotten all of that way, and I know you are pounding on the table, please get to the Riff Raff review. I've been waiting to hear about this movie that I've never heard of. Let's go ahead and get on with it. Once again, this is directed by Ditto Montiel. I looked him up on IMDb, and this is the first film of his I have ever seen. So, again, our first foray into his filmography. Now, before I get into my review and everything, I do have to over-explain everything, as I always do. I am going to give you a spoiler-free review and plot synopsis. Now, in the plot synopsis, I have hidden two movie quotes. And if you can identify both or either or and get in touch with me through the various means that I have given you earlier in this episode, I will give you a point for each one that you get right. At the end of the month, I add up all the points, and whoever wins gets to pick a movie for me to review next month. And if you only listen from time to time, first of all, shame on you. Second, you could play just for fun to let me know you're out there. I always like some feedback while I'm sitting here in my little fort of blankets recording these episodes because it does get a bit lowly, but you could always play along. I know it seems a little uncool, but isn't that everybody's favorite time of the week is to be uncool with Chris? All right, so I've gotten all of that out of the way. Let's talk about Riff Raff. We open the film with a young man, DJ, played by Miles J. Harvey, holding a gun to his dad, Vincent, played by Ed Harris. We are then treated to one of the director's favorite devices, a flashback, as we start to see what started all of this chaos. DJ is actually a very smart young man headed to college, and he is spending New Year's with his mom, Sandy, played by Gabrielle Union, and his aforementioned stepdad, Vincent. One night, Vincent's biological son, Rocco, played by Louis Pullman, shows up out of the blue with his pregnant girlfriend, Marina, played by Emanuela Postaccini, which begins to bring Vincent's illicit past back into his life, as well as his ex-wife, Ruth, played by Jennifer Coolidge. Now, it seems Rocco is a bit of a small-time crook who has pissed off a very big-time crook, Lefty, played by Bill Murray. Lefty is now chasing after Rocco, looking for revenge, with a fellow hitman, Lonnie, played by Pete Davidson. Rocco begs his dad for help, reminding Vincent of what an animal Lefty can be, even telling him Lefty said something like, "Baby, up your butt with a coconut." I think he was prepared to do it, except I saw no coconut. He had no coconut to my knowledge. Hint, hint. That's a good one. You're going to struggle to find that one. I'll give you a hint. That was one of my favorite Bill Murray movies of all time. Now, before Vincent can help Rocco, Lefty finds this dysfunctional family and begins to hold them accountable for past indiscretion. Now, Vincent pleads with Lefty, saying something like, "Jules, did you ever hear the philosophy that once a man admits that he's wrong, that he is immediately forgiven for all wrongdoings? Have you ever heard that?" Hint, hint. That one's pretty easy. Now, will this plea for mercy sway Lefty and convince him to leave this family alone? Or will Lefty inevitably gun everyone down like a bunch of Reservoir Dogs? Well, I will never spoil the movie and answer those questions, but I will give you the best review in all the podcast universe, nay, in all of the universe. Now, if this is your first time listening or you haven't listened in a while, I do break my reviews down into 3 segments: the good, the bad, and the nitpicky. The good are the things that I like. The bad are obviously things that I don't. And the nitpicky are things that are neither good nor bad, just sometimes Hollywoodisms or sometimes just silly things in these movies that my weird little brain picks up on and make me laugh. And as I'm trying to do with this podcast, I would like to make you laugh because there are 2 things I like to do in this world. One of them is this podcast, which I like to make people laugh, and the other thing I really don't want anybody to laugh during. That's not good for the self-esteem. You can take that however you want to. I mean, we're all friends here, right? All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the good of Riff Raff.
Sounds pleasant.
And I'm going to start with really the biggest positive of this film, and one that took me by surprise. Because as I mentioned, I knew this was a Bill Murray movie. I had never heard of it until I saw him giving an interview, and he was promoting this movie a little bit. I think it was a couple months ago, maybe, or last month, at any rate. So I was like, oh, yeah, I do love Bill Murray. This kind of hit on a weekend when there really was nothing else out in the movie theater. So I thought, all right, I love Bill Murray. Let me go check this film out. So I'm sitting there in my empty movie theater. It was completely empty, and I was just enjoying that fact. No cell phones were going off. No one was talking. No babies crying. Oh, God, it was just peace. I wonder how much it would cost for me to just buy every ticket in movie theaters and sit there by myself. At any rate, the intro comes up, and it just goes through this cast, and I'm like, oh, my God. It's got, like I said, Ed Harris, Jennifer Coolidge, Lewis Pullman, which is the son of Bill Pullman, whose career I think I remember him most from, was it Bad Night at the El Royale? I remember seeing him in that and kind of being like, oh, I like him. And ever since then, anytime he pops up in something, I'm really enjoying his performance. I'd like to see where his career goes. And Gabrielle Union was in. I was like, geez, this cast is stacked from top to bottom. And I think everyone here, I mean, God, how could anybody in this movie be bad? I guess Pete Davidson, but he's really just playing Pete Davidson. I will say he doesn't really bring, I'm not going to put him in like the bad or the negative of the film because he's just Pete Davidson as a hitman. Whatever you would think that is, that's kind of what he is. But I think everybody is doing an amazing job. The young man that plays DJ, Miles J. Harvey, he's sort of the heart of the film. He's the main, I guess he's the main protagonist that we follow. And he is recovering from heartbreak after being friend zoned by a young lady. And God, what a horrible place to be. But it starts early on with him bonding with his dad, Ed Harris, Vincent, who's his stepdad, but he's been with him his whole life. And they really have this great moment at the end, this kind of father-son talking about women and all that stuff. And the dad's imparting his wisdom on him. And it's a really nice scene. And you kind of get the build up with those two characters. And then when Gabrielle Union comes in and her dynamic with them of this really idyllic situation that they're in, this sort of upper middle class, they've gotten money and, you know, things are great, which then you get the clash of the criminal past of Vincent coming back through his son Rocco. But yeah, I think everybody in the cast is great. I think honestly, the one that to me steals the movie, which I was shocked because I figured Bill Murray would be great in this, and he is. It's fun to see him kind of taking a bad guy role, a villain role. However, you know, he's Bill Murray. He's going to have his moments here and there that'll make you laugh. But it was Jennifer Coolidge. I would say the first half of this movie, she is absolutely hilarious. She's sort of this drunk, loud, obnoxious woman, and she just comes in firing her mouth off and just making some of the most obnoxious and crude jokes you could imagine. And she does it in her Jennifer Coolidge way. So I really think she carried most of this movie for me. And that's saying something in a film with, like I said, Ed Harris. I mean, come on, Ed Harris. Ed Harris could sit there and read the directions off a shampoo bottle, and it would be an amazing performance. And I think the director, God, I hope I'm saying his name right, Ditto Montiel, he is wise in his direction in that he allows these actors to act. I mean, God, it was I see a lot of bad movies or just average movies. Although I will say lately some of the horror movies have really excelled or at least been better than my expectations and had good performances in it. It was nice though. There were scenes in this movie where I was like, "Oh my God, there's actors with a script and they're giving performances that I'm buying into and I care about these characters." There's a nice moment where Ed Harris and Lewis Pullman are out on the deck kind of getting caught up and they have this antagonistic relationship because of course they do. And you just see some really good performances where Lewis Pullman, Rocco, his character, every time Ed Harris, Vincent, his character, says something kind or nice or gives him any kind of praise, he kind of, I don't want to say lights up, but you see him kind of become proud of himself. And then it's immediately undercut by something else Vincent says, and you can see it kind of drain out of him. And it was like you're sitting there going, "Oh my god, yes, this is right. This is how it's supposed to be." You have actors with a script, and yes, this is it. Oh, thank God. So really, very early on in the movie, and like I said, we'll get to the negatives, but very early on in the movie, I was like, "Oh, this is so wonderful." And I guess that really leads into the next positive. I think the movie looks well. Ditto Montiel, he does a great job as a director as far as the aesthetic of the film. They have this very nice house out in this wood, so it's isolated, and you kind of get that through a drive that Rocco takes up there and how they're, really out there. So it kind of heightens a little bit of the tension when Lefty Bill Murray shows up. There's really nowhere for them to go. Plus, he has his flair visually. There's times when the camera, and he knows how to use it. The camera moves around nice through the house, or when they go into the town, or different things. I don't want to spoil anything. There's some moments with Lefty and Lonnie, the hitmen, that the scenes are set up well and filmed well. It kind of maybe lull you into a sense that, okay, maybe nothing bad's going to happen to here. And then bam, there's the violence of the situation because these are violent criminals. Plus, again, you get the whole setup with this loving family of Ed Harris. I'm always going to use the actors' names. I should say the characters' names, right? Vincent, DJ, and Sandy. I think that was the mom's name. So yeah, it's a nice clash of styles between the crime and the suburban dreamland that this is, and I think Ditto does a fine job keeping you invested in that visually. I'm not going to say this isn't Citizen Kane or something, but it looks good. How about that? It doesn't look like a cheap movie. The next positive for the film would be the script. I think that dialogue wise, how about we'll go with that? It does a good job with the comedy. Of course, again, you got Jennifer Coolidge and Bill Murray, and even Pete Davidson, well known for their comedy, so they can handle that. Ed Harris, he can again, he can play anything. Gabrielle Union, she could do comedy as well, and like I said, Miles J. Harvey. I think they all handle the comedic side. This isn't like a laugh out loud. Even though there were a few moments I did laugh out loud in the movie theater because I knew I didn't have to bother anybody. But it's there are moments where you just kind of chuckle or it's a smart line. It's a very blend of comedy with the crime, which I think the script does well because when it needs to be violent, when it needs to be threatening, then the characters take those moments serious. There's not like, I hate to say Marvel because you know how I feel about that, but it doesn't have quips at inappropriate times. When the scene is tense, then it's very on your edge and you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen here? And then when there are comedic moments, you get a good chuckle out of that. So I think it does a good balance there. There are some issues that we'll get to in a moment, but for the most part, I think the dialogue and how it balances the comedic tone with the crime tone, they do a very good job with that. And my final positive for this film, and I always say this, it's under 2 hours. I think it's about an hour and 45 minutes, somewhere in that ballpark. So it moves along at a pretty good pace. It kind of does lull here and there that we'll get to in a moment. But for the most part, it didn't really waste a whole lot of my time. Although I will say the movie theater I had to go see it in, the Regal, God, I swear it takes 30 minutes for the damn movie to start. So, I went and saw this at, I can't remember what time it was, but because I looked at my phone and I was the only one in the movie theater, so I knew I wasn't going to bother anybody. And I was like, Jesus, this has been a half hour. Let's go ahead and start the movie already. But I wish Regal would really cut back on the commercials. That would be wonderful. But overall, it's less than 2 hours, so it's not going to waste your time that much. So let's go ahead and move into the bad or the negative for Riff Raff.
Uh-oh, I don't like the sound of that.
So my first negative or bad for this film, and I mentioned it in my plot synopsis, is the heavy, 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 heavy reliance on flashbacks. My God, this movie, I think the plot of this movie, if you filmed it straight through, would only be about 15 minutes. But we have flashbacks from every character about things that happened way in the past to things that happened a day ago. And it gets to where it bogs the movie down because every time one of the characters would start the whole look of the flashback where they're kind of staring off, you're like, oh God, no, not another one. And you just bog down. You're like, okay, I don't really need to see all of this. A couple lines of dialogue would be enough. I'm semi-smart. I may not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but I can piece a few things together, especially the amount of movies I've seen. So I don't need it spoon-fed to me in that regard. So it got to be so bad that when I was in the movie theater, I even was like, oh God, please stop with the flashbacks. In fact, this is 2 days ago, Chris, sitting in the movie theater. Oh my God, another flashback. Please stop with the flashbacks. I know what I'm going to criticize in my podcast review. There. How about that? A flashback inside of a movie review podcast. You're not getting that. You're not getting that with other podcasters. They're not that creative. They're not thinking outside the box like I am. See, you got a flashback in a podcast. That might be the first one ever. I'm going to go ahead and say it is. As far as we know, you and I, because there's only a couple of us listening, we're going to say that was the first flashback in podcast history. But yeah, it does bog the movie down. And that was one of the things I kind of alluded to with the script. It just gets to points where you're like, okay, can we just pick it up a little bit? We know where the movie's going. It's pretty straightforward. I don't need to keep getting flashbacks for stuff that, again, I could have had a couple of lines of dialogue, or really some of it you already knew. You kind of got the gist of it. Like there's this one whole flashback with Bill Murray and his son, and you're like, okay, I really didn't need that. I kind of got it. The reason why Bill Murray is tracking down Rocco, you explained that to me, so that's all I really needed. So I think that might be the biggest negative for the film. Although I will say the rest of it, I guess the end is kind of weak in the resolution of everything, just the way it's handled. I don't want to, again, I don't want to spoil things, but there's the big confrontation that you know is going to happen. And it was just like, oh, okay, that's how we're going with this. Nah, that's fine. It's all right. You know what I mean? It didn't stick the landing enough for me to go, oh shit, this was amazing. And that's kind of really my overall negative for this film. As I mentioned with this cast, yeah, I sat in a movie theater and all these names are coming up. I'm like, oh my God, this should be an amazing movie. And I had the same thought when I was leaving the movie theater. This should be an amazing movie. And it just really isn't. It never rises above good. It's a weird negative for the film, but it just felt like there should be more there. And I guess that lands at the feet of the script because there's not much story here, and all these flashbacks that slow it down. You're like, okay, this you could have done so much more with these actors because they're giving excellent performances. So you could have really had them diving into things or embellish some more of the comedy or something. I don't know. It just seemed like there was something missing in this movie to really elevate it past good. Although I'm kind of giving away my final review for this film, but yeah, that's sort of the ultimate complaint for this film. So let's go ahead and move into the nitpicky for Riff Raff.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun on the bun.
And again, these are things that are really neither good nor bad. They're just Hollywoodisms or just weird things in these movies that make me laugh. The first thing that made me laugh, oh my God. As I mentioned early on, Ed Harris was a Vincent and DJ. They're having this bonding moment, a man's moment where, the dad's explaining women to his son who's now having to deal with dating and all that fun stuff. So he's imparting his advice and kind of explaining how he met DJ's mom and how that all went and everything like that. And he reveals some information about DJ's actual father. And he's like, hey, don't tell your mom about this. I'm just trying to show you, just because this didn't work out doesn't mean there isn't the one. They do a lot of that throughout this movie out there for you. So I think it was the next scene or close to it. DJ is kind of having a mild argument with his mother. He doesn't always stand up to her, but he has a moment. And what does he do? He tells him what Ed Harris told him. I was like, what the hell, man? Don't you understand the code? The man code, the bro code? You don't just spill stuff like that, dude. Your dad's never going to trust you with anything anymore. Just to save your hide, you're like, oh, this is what dad told me. All right, I get it. Just throw the dads under the bus. That's just not, it's a tough life to be a dad. Everything you do wrong is going to get brought up. Mom is a saint, but boy, dad told me this. Bam. Oh, shit. And of course, the dad has to get chewed out for that. I had some flashbacks, speaking of those, to my time when I was married and had kids and all that fun stuff. So yeah, out there, you kids, if your dad tells you something, says, hey, don't tell your mom, don't tell your mom. My next nitpick, again, these really aren't quote unquote nitpicks. I just couldn't think of a good title for that segment of this review. But anyway, The girlfriend of Rocco, Marina, played by Emanuela Postaccini. She is obviously Italian, and she speaks Italian in this movie, and I have been trying to learn as best I can online some Italian because I just love it. At any time they use it in the movie, I just like, oh, what a beautiful language. Again, I live in the South in America, and we just sound dumb. We're just old hicks down here. Yeah, what is that Italian? But anytime I hear it, I'm just like such a beautiful, magical, musical language, and I'm jealous. Anybody that lives in Italy or is listening in Italy, I love your language. I just absolutely love it. One day I hope to visit Italy. I don't know if your country lives up to what I have in mind or this image that I've built up because of your language, but one day I'm going to get there. And I'll say my 3 words that I have learned over the past couple of years. Oh boy, what do they say about old dogs and new tricks? That's not far from the truth. And my final nitpick for Riff Raff is there is sort of this, I don't want to say subplot, maybe theme of the movie about settling for someone who isn't the one because you're always supposed to be looking for the one. And I'm just like, Hollywood, please stop. Just stop with all that bullshit already. I can't take it anymore. For all I know, my one, I flipped her off in traffic one day. That would be my luck. She was probably looking at me like, oh, that's the man of my dreams. And I'm just like, speed up. Come on. I want to make the light, bitch. I'm a horrible, horrible person. That's why I'm single. But yeah, I'm kind of getting tired of the one. Trust me, everyone out there, there's no such thing. There isn't. You're going to find someone that you think is great and you're going to fall in love. And hopefully for you, it works out. And if it doesn't, you know what? There are how many billions of people on this earth? Someone out there is going to be the next one and the next and the next. Just try to learn from the one if she breaks your heart, or he. I'm sorry. I can only go through personal experience, but whoever breaks your heart, if they do that, just learn from that so you don't follow that road again and kind of get stuck on a pattern of women. I mean, people. And then that just leads to another heartbreak. So, yeah, that's my final nitpick for the film. Hollywood, please, please stop. I know you never will. It looks great. Believe me, it does. I want it to be like that. There are moments in this movie with the flashbacks where like it just happened this way and that way. And I'm like, oh, it would be so wonderful. But I've never had that. So anyway, I guess I'm just a bitter old man. So my final recommendation for Riff Raff, if you couldn't tell from my review, I think this movie is good. I think the performances really carry it further than it could have if it had a lesser cast. I wouldn't tell you to go see it in the movie theater, although, as I mentioned, sitting in my empty movie theater, I'm sure there are plenty of you that haven't. Like I said, there's a lot of you, if you are listening, who don't even know what the hell this movie is, never heard of it, anything like that. So yeah, I don't expect you to be wasting precious gasoline driving to the movie theaters is. But no, if you want to see it on streaming, I think it's passable enough that you would enjoy it. Again, the performances are good enough to keep you interested in the movie. It's a simple story. It's only an hour and 40 some minutes, so it's not going to waste a lot of your time, but it's also going to be very forgettable. I struggled coming up with my plot synopsis. I know I hear some of you out there say you always struggle with your plot synopsis, so up yours, up your butt with the coconut. But yeah, I couldn't remember half of what happened because it's not going to stick with me. Probably in another week, I'll forget that it ever happened. So it's one of those kind of movies. It's something I would tell you to watch on streaming if you're a fan of any of the actors in this movie. Especially, I would say Jennifer Coolidge. I think she really carries at least the very first half of this movie. But everybody's got good moments and they're good performances, so you can appreciate that. But that's not enough to go out and spend money to see it in a movie theater. So unfortunately, I would say just wait for it to hit the streaming services, which will probably be in about 3.5 days. So that wraps up my review for Riff Raff. And as I mentioned, I do have a new segment that I want to do. I think I'm going to do it once a week. I would like to apologize for the people I'm about to mention for bringing you up on an episode that I know probably there aren't going to be many listens to. I'm sorry. If it makes you feel better, even if this was a popular movie, I probably wouldn't get a lot of listens. That's not true. I get billions of listens. I am a juggernaut in podcasting. One day I will be. But I just would like to mention some podcasters or YouTubers, probably once a week, that I have listened to over the week and give you maybe some recommendations if you want to go check them out. I have a couple on here that I have already mentioned, but I want to bring them up again just since this is the new segment I'm going to do. I mentioned my friend Frank over at Silver Screeners. He does a great job with his podcast where he talks a lot about classic movies, but he'll always pair either two classic movies that have a similar theme or maybe a more modern movie with a classic movie to give you an idea that some of these stories have been being told since movies were even started. So you get some really cool comparisons, some great trivia, some contests, and he's really a great host. So again, Silver Screeners podcast, go check him out. He also does a podcast, Movies Across the Pod, with his co-host that I want to talk about because he gave me a nice shout out earlier this week, and that would be Davey A, who again is on that Movies Across the Pod, which is pretty cool. They have movies, one of them will select a movie the other one hasn't seen, and then they'll review it together. It's pretty cool. But Davey also has his own podcast called Davey A Talks. And he does a lot of pop culture, movies, video games, and stuff, but it could just be random stuff from time to time. I would tell you to listen to it because Davey, in my opinion, has the best voice in all the podcasting universe. Well, maybe the second best, Dave. Maybe the second best. I don't know. Feel free to vote on that, whoever's listening. But I do love to hear his voice, and he does a great job. If he ever does interviews, my God, you would think this guy has been professionally trained to give interviews. He is that good. So, yeah, definitely check out Davey A Talks. And the other one I listened to was called Just the Thing, and it is hosted by Joel and Chris, another Chris, so it has to be good, correct? And I listened to theirs. They did one on Batman Returns. It was their Christmas special because Batman Returns, I guess, is a Christmas movie. It depends. I mean, Die Hard, everybody argues about that. You could argue that Batman Returns is a Christmas movie. There's Christmas in it. But they do this really cool thing where they, towards the end of their conversation about the movie, and they talk about it. It's really a lot of fun. But they will try to figure out a way to put John Carpenter's The Thing into this movie, how they can get that creature into this Batman movie or whatever movie they're talking about. So I thought that was absolutely hilarious because I do love The Thing. And then you start thinking, okay, well, how would I get that into one of these movies? How would The Thing fit into a Batman movie? So they have a lot of funny moments. Excellent. They have guests and stuff. So definitely go check out Just the Thing. And I will say, if you are listening to some podcast, either ones I recommend or just in general, and you don't like it, could you do us all a favor and not leave any kind of negative reviews? No 1-star reviews. A lot of us are doing this for free, just for a hobby and having fun. And it's kind of a dick move to give someone a 1-star review. I think it's pretty funny whenever I get one, so I don't really care. But if you want to think the show's good, follow it and leave a 5-star review. If you don't like it, just don't listen to it anymore. Even if it offends you, just turn it off and walk away. But anyway, go check out those podcasts, Silver Screeners, Movies Across the Pod, Davey A Talks, and Just the Thing. So that brings us to the end of this episode. If you're still here, then I must have done something right. And again, follow the show. Give me a rating, a review. I'd appreciate that as well. Follow me on social media. Get in touch with me. Play the movie quote contest. Have some fun in your life. Live a little. We don't know how much longer we're going to be here. I'm always glad you're here. I tell everyone I know I've got the smartest and sexiest audience in all the podcast universe. And you never fail to live up to those high standards. And as you are traveling around on this blue and green ball, bouncing through the cosmos, I need you to do one thing for me. Go out there and do that voodoo that you do so well.
All right, show's over. I'm tired.